As Delilah dropped the call, she walked down the hallway, her steps echoing softly as she opened the door to her secret room. The bottles lined on the shelves, each containing a trapped soul. Delilah began chanting her incantations, and Aremu started to vomit money. But Aremu's destiny was not so bright, so he produced only a little money. Frustrated, Delilah shoved him aside. Following the clinking sound, Olalekan moved deeper into the mansion. The sound led him to a hidden room, the door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, he stepped inside and was met with a sight that froze him in his tracks. Delilah. As Olalekan looked down, he saw a bottle containing a human figure on the ground. Terrified, he almost ran out, but then he realized this could be the clue he had been searching for. He then bent down to take a closer look. Lo and behold, he saw a tiny man jumping inside the bottle. On a closer look, the figure resembled Mr. Wasiu, but Olalekan wasn't entirely sure. Heart pounding! Olalekan fearfully opened the bottle. To his amazement, a tiny man crept out of the bottle. The little man stood before him, blinking in the dim light. Fear gripped Olalekan as the surreal sight was too much for him to process. His vision blurred and he felt his knees buckle. Before he knew it, the room spun around him and he passed out, collapsing onto the cold, hard floor. When Olalekan eventually woke up, the storm had stopped and the first light of dawn was filtering through the open door. As he struggled to make sense of his surroundings, his eyes fell upon the little man again, now sitting calmly on the bottle, waiting for Olalekan to awake. Olalekan scrambled to his feet, the events from the previous night rushing back to him. He bent down and offered his palm to the tiny man, who cautiously climbed onto it. Olalekan brought him closer to his face, his eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Who are you? How did you become so little? How did you get into this bottle? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The tiny man gestured frantically, but no words came out. It was then that Olalekan realized the little man couldn't talk. Frustrated but determined to help, Olalekan carefully placed the tiny man in his pocket and walked out of the mansion. As Olalekan walked through the eerily silent halls and out into the bright morning light, he couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. The mansion, once a symbol of Delilah's power and mystery, now felt like a tomb of dark secrets. This story is about to take an unbelievable twist, but before I dive into the heart of the story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel for more interesting stories. Also, ensure to turn on your bell notification icon so that you will get notified whenever I post a new video. Now, join me as to dive into the story proper. When the matter Tai Kelso say, Hafsat murmured, her eyes wide with awe as she watched Delilah stride across her new compound. Rabba Hafsat, you are more beautiful than she is, Ummi whispered reassuringly into Hafsat's ears as they cleaned Delilah's new residence. Delilah had recently relocated to the village of Azari in the far north, seeking a fresh start away from Agemo. Azari was a village where beauty was understated. The women mostly wore hijabs that covered their bodies. The arrival of Delilah, with her stunning looks and bold demeanor, quickly made her the subject of constant gossip. She flaunted her attractive body, ignoring the whispers and disapproving looks from the villagers. One sunny afternoon, Delilah was at the market buying groceries, her presence drawing curious glances from everyone. Suddenly, an older woman, her face twisted with disapproval, poured water on Delilah. "You don't kinky mana. Go back in kunya." The woman scolded sharply. Delilah stood there, drenched and stunned, her groceries scattered on the ground. Before she could react, a young man named Musa rushed to her aid. "What is wrong with you?" he scolded the older woman, who muttered angrily as she walked away. Turning to Delilah, Musa's expression softened. "Are you okay?" Delilah nodded, still in shock. Musa helped her gather her groceries and led her to her car. As they drove back to her house, Delilah glanced at him gratefully. "Thank you," she said softly. At her house, Delilah invited Musa inside, offering him food and drinks as a gesture of appreciation. They chatted easily, laughter filling the room as they shared stories. One thing led to another, and soon Musa found himself drawn into Delilah's enigmatic allure. That night, he slept with her, unaware of the dark consequences that might follow. The next morning, Musa left Delilah's house, feeling exhilarated and oddly drained. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was different. Over the next few weeks, his once thriving business began to falter inexplicably. He faced financial difficulties, his health deteriorated, and he found himself plagued by a growing sense of unease. Musa's friends and family began to notice his decline. Whispers spread through the village, much like they had in Agemo, as people speculated about the cause of Musa's misfortunes. Suspicion turned towards Delilah, the beautiful newcomer whose presence seemed to coincide with Musa's downfall. As Delilah continued her routine, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of foreboding. Her power was secure, but the villagers' whispers were becoming louder, more insistent. She knew she needed to be cautious to avoid drawing too much attention to herself. Meanwhile, Delilah, rejuvenated and content, began to notice subtle changes around her new home. The strange occurrences she had become familiar with in Agemo started happening again. The bottles would move on their own and sometimes roll under the shelf. Whispers echoed through the walls, and the bottles glowed faintly. What could this mean? She wondered. Alhaji Dan, a wealthy businessman who lives in the city but frequently visited the village, returned to his village to check on his building projects. As he inspected his project, he overheard his workers gossiping about a beautiful stranger. Paying close attention, he realized they were speaking about a mysterious woman who had recently moved to the village. But why were they talking about her in that manner? He wondered. Curiosity piqued. Alhaji Dan decided to investigate further. As he drove out of the project site, he spotted two young men walking by. He stopped his car and asked them where the new woman's house was. They eagerly directed him toward Delilah's residence. Intrigued, he quickly drove towards her house. Upon arriving, Alhaji Dan remained in his car for a while, contemplating whether to get out or just drive back to the city. The stories he had heard about this woman were intriguing, and he felt a compelling urge to see her for himself. Finally, he decided that he must meet this woman who had become the talk of the village. He parked his car and stepped out. Then he approached her gate and banged on it. Moments later, Delilah emerged, and as soon as he saw her, Alhaji Dan was struck by her beauty.
"My God, she's so beautiful,"
he murmured to himself. Delilah walked up to the gate and asked him what he wanted. He smiled, trying to maintain his composure.
I was driving past and thought I should stop to pay homage to the newcomer in the village,
he said, a charming smile spreading across his face. They both laughed, breaking the initial tension. Delilah invited him in, but as he was about to step into the compound, he felt a strange shock around his legs, like an electric jolt. Immediately, he sensed that something was not right. His instinct screamed at him to leave. "Aha! I have a meeting in the city by 6 p.m. I better rush back now, but I will come around next time," he said, coming up with an excuse. As he turned to leave, Delilah called him back. "Wait, Alhaji, can we at least exchange contact so that we can keep in touch?" He hesitated, the strange feeling from the shock still lingering, but then, not wanting to seem rude or suspicious, he nodded and gave her his phone number. "Sure, here it is," he said, handing her his business card. Delilah took the card and smiled. "Thank you, Alhaji. I will definitely be in touch." Delilah watched Alhaji Dan drive away, a sly smile playing on her lips. She had sensed his hesitation and knew she would have to be careful. Her power in the village was growing, but so was the suspicion surrounding her. As Alhaji Dan drove back to the city, his mind was racing. The shock he had felt was unsettling, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. He decided he would keep his distance, but stay vigilant. Something told him that Delilah was more than just a beautiful stranger. She was a mystery that needed unraveling. As night fell, Delilah retreated to her bedroom, the dim light casting eerie shadows on the walls. She needed to strengthen her spells to ensure her power remained unchallenged. The bottles on the shelves rattled softly, the trapped spirits restless. She whispered incantations, drawing power from the bottled souls, reinforcing the dark magic that protected her. But even as she performed her rituals, she couldn't shake off the feeling that her time in Nazareth might be limited. The villagers' curiosity and the unexpected visit from Alhaji Dan were signs that her presence was stirring too much attention. She would need to be more cautious, more cunning. While Delilah was deep in her rituals, chanting softly, the air thick with dark energy, Hafsat, her domestic staff, called out,
"Ma Delilah! Ma Delilah!"
Startled, Delilah's hands shook and 4 bottles fell from the shelves, shattering on the ground. Instantly, 4 tiny men were released, their spirits freed from the bottled prisons. Enraged, Delilah rushed to the door and screamed, "What?" Her voice thundered like a lion's roar. Hafsat, standing just outside, was so terrified. She stuttered, Ma.
I came to ask if I can turn off the television since you are no longer watching it.
"Yes, Hafsat," Delilah backed. Trembling, Hafsat scampered off, her heart pounding. She had never seen her madam so angry. Was it just about the television, or was there more to this? Hafsat wondered as she hurried away. As Delilah returned to her room, she quickly realized the tiny men were no longer on the ground. Panic set in as she searched frantically. She found only one, Musa, who was too weak to hide effectively. Delilah snatched him up and threw him into a bowl of water to immobilize him temporarily. She tore through the room, searching for the other 3 tiny men, but they were nowhere to be found. Grabbing another bottle to recapture Musa, Delilah turned back to the bowl, only to find Musa had drowned. Fear gripped her heart. She knew what this meant. Another death. Immediately, she began packing her belongings, moving them hastily into her car. She knew she couldn't stay in Azare any longer. She had to leave before the villagers discovered her dark secrets. While Delilah was hurriedly packing her belongings into the car, Hafsat watched through the window. Her curiosity piqued, but her fear too great to confront her madam. The moment Delilah drove off into the night, Hafsat's intrigue got the better of her. She cautiously entered Delilah's room, her heart racing. As Hafsat snooped around, she heard small movements. Bending down to investigate, she gasped in shock at what she saw. 2 tiny men hiding under a chair. Overcome with fear and disbelief, Hafsat screamed and fainted on the spot. The villagers of Azare woke up to the shocking news of Delilah's sudden departure and Musa's mysterious death. "This can't be a coincidence," the youth president declared, his face etched with concern. "Since that woman came to this village, men have been dying mysteriously, and each of these men has had some contact with Delilah." The youth president's words struck a chord with the gathered men. They recalled Haruna, who had died just a few weeks before. His wife had attacked Delilah in the market, accusing her of being the reason Haruna was unfaithful. A few weeks after that confrontation, Haruna was found dead in his room. The cause of his death, unknown. Then, there was Alhaji Balarabe, who had similar marital problems due to his involvement with Delilah. He too met an untimely death. Now, Musa was the latest victim. The pattern was undeniable. Something was definitely not right. As the young men deliberated on what to do next, a young woman, Hafsat, Delilah's domestic staff, ran past them, her face pale with terror. "Isn't that Hafsat?" one of the men asked. Immediately recognizing her, they quickly ran after her and stopped her. "Hafsat, what is the matter? Why are you running like this?" one of them asked, trying to calm her down. Still panting, Hafsat pointed frantically towards Delilah's house.
Na gansu. Kanana mutani na gansu.
She exclaimed. Where? They asked, their curiosity and concern mounting.
Agidan Delilah na gansu.
She replied, her voice trembling with fear. Before they could ask more questions, Hafsat fainted again, collapsing onto the ground. The men exchanged worried glances. They knew that they had to act fast. Let us go to Delilah's house and see for ourselves, one of the men suggested. The others nodded in agreement. They approached Delilah's house cautiously, unsure of what they might find. The gate was still ajar, and they entered the compound silently. Inside, they saw signs of a hasty departure. Scattered belongings, an overturned chair, and broken glasses. Spread out and look for anything unusual, the youth president instructed. As they searched, one of the men noticed a small movement under a chair. He bent down and gasped. Over here, he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. The others gathered around and saw two tiny men, cowering in fear. Hafsat was right. Olalekan had seen a tiny man. Hafsat saw tiny men. The youth of Azare saw tiny men, but Alhaji Dan is yet to be contacted by Delilah. What do you think would happen to Alhaji Dan? What do you think will happen to Delilah? If you enjoyed the story and would like to know how the story progressed, please consider subscribing, not forgetting to turn on the bell notification icon so that when the next part of this video is being uploaded, you will be the first to be notified. Also, make sure to like, share, and drop your thoughts about this story in the comment section. You can also check out these videos here. I promise you won't be disappointed. Till we meet again in my next video, remain blessed.